It all begins on a quiet night outside a brightly lit convenience store. On a cell phone screen, the exploration of an RPG game comes to an end with a good job message. The young man playing with concentration is interrupted when a customer enters the store, making the alarm ring. This is Lee Young-jin, a 29-year-old young man who works there and has already accumulated nearly 10,000 hours in the game. The store owner suddenly appears, calling the young man by his full name in a very serious way. Jin gets startled by his boss's presence and starts to imagine what might be happening. He immediately imagines that he will finally be replaced by an extremely pretty female coworker. To the young man's surprise, the boss reveals that he is actually moving to Australia for good. Then, the man says with a big smile that he wants to leave that convenience store to him. The young man is left completely in shock, unable to believe what he just heard from his boss. The boss explains that he knows about his hard work and asks what his big dream in life was. He timidly replies that his biggest dream has always been to become the owner of a convenience store. Even so, the young man wonders why he received such an incredible opportunity out of nowhere. The boss confesses that he has had many employees, but has never met anyone as dedicated as him. Young Jin cries with emotion, remembering that he truly always gave his best by doing a perfect job. He quickly gets up from his chair with tears streaming down his face from so much happiness. Overcome with emotion, the young man says he is going to take a little walk while the game shows that his addiction continues. The store owner just watches the young employee's dramatic exit with a very calm and gentle look. On the street, the young man celebrates his luck, thinking that this is finally the happiest day of his entire life. Suddenly, a pair of giant headlights shines brightly in his direction, accompanied by a horn. He panics upon realizing that a huge truck is about to hit him in the middle of the intersection. The young man desperately tries to escape that terrible situation while screaming, not knowing where to go. A bright yellow light tastes over the entire screen at the exact moment the inevitable impact happens. The terrible impact violently throws the young man's body high up over the cargo vehicle. Right after that, he falls hard to the ground while his cell phone slides far away from him. Fallen and bloodied, he laments the fact that he was hit by 2 trucks in a row. Accepting his tragic destiny, the young man starts to think about what he would like to experience in his next life. He wishes to reincarnate in a harem story or as someone super powerful while his cell phone goes dark. Suddenly, the scene changes and he finds himself in a dark room, hearing that he has lost all his privileges. The blonde young man with his head down listens to a cold voice asking if he has any last words to say. He realizes that he is standing before a severe student council that is anxiously awaiting his reply. The blonde girl in the center points her finger at him, calling him by the name of Wolfram von Lohengrin with disdain. The young man realizes that this young woman is the character Eve, that this scene is identical to his game's story. He realizes that he reincarnated in the game, but unfortunately, he didn't get the harem or the powers he wanted. Despair hits hard when he remembers this character Wolfram dies right in the adventure's prologue. At the council table, the young Eve repeats the question in an authoritarian way, wanting his last words. He remembers that in the game, the proud character would say that he would leave alone, and that everyone would regret it. In the original story, he would be attacked and brutally harmed by furious students right after leaving. Wolfram's destiny in the game story was to end up lifeless in a very pathetic way on the floor. To make matters worse, he remembers that the character only returned in the 5th act, transformed into a zombie. On that route, Eve herself ended up eliminating Wolfram's zombie without showing any mercy. Returning to the present, Eve offers him the chance to leave the academy peacefully as her final mercy. Thinking fast, the young man decides to change his posture and flashes an enigmatic smile in front of everyone in the room. The blonde girl gets completely confused, seeing that unexpected reaction from the young man who was supposed to be scared. He pretends to be calm so he won't be expelled immediately, because he knows he will perish if he steps foot outside. Sitting in the chair, he tries to hatch a desperate plan to manage to stay at the academy no matter what. Cold sweat drips down his face while he wonders what he can do to reverse that situation. He tries to recall details about Eve, remembering that despite being cold, she is an exemplary student with a nerd side, decided to use that weak point to his advantage. The young man asks, ironically, if she is really going to expel him. Eve repeats firmly that his authority has been totally revoked under the Emperor's own decree. Eve confirms with a serious look that the young man's authority really has been totally revoked in an official way. Sitting in the center of the hall, the young man reflects on the term deprived, while the young woman watches him confused. Eve loses her patience for good and shouts, asking what he thinks he is doing at that moment. He lets out a dramatic and exaggerated cry, pretending despair over the loss of his privileges at the academy. His flashy reaction leaves the blonde girl completely startled and not knowing what to say. She stands up furiously and demands by shouting that Wolfram stop resisting and leave there immediately, with a very serious and focused look. The young man calmly replies that he cannot do what she wants. He assumes a confident posture and categorically states that he is not going to leave the prestigious academy. Faced with the girl's astonishment, he asks her to read the Emperor's decree carefully one more time. The young man asks with a little smile where exactly in the document his official expulsion is written. All the council members are left completely speechless by that so unexpected question. The girl insists that the decree talks about the loss of rights, but he knows the game's rules very well. He points to himself and explains that only the position of president and the perks were taken away from him. Then, the young man questions her if she remembers the first article and paragraph 8 of the internal rules. Wolfram walks confidently through the hall while explaining the rules of equality for all students. He concludes by saying that being a student is a fundamental right, which makes Eve even more annoyed. With a sarcastic smile, the young man tells her to stop caring about him and focus on the new council. A silver-haired elf counselor stands up angrily, saying that that is impossible to happen. She cites all the absurd perks and the monthly money, stating that he would never survive without them. He mocks her statement, questioning if they really think a noble cannot live without luxury. Wolfram changes his facial expression to a cold look and questions her about what she would do if he actually survived. The elf counselor is left totally without reaction and surprised upon being faced in such an imposing way. The young man recalls his life as a convenience store worker and demands that she apologize for underestimating him. Faced with the strong psychological pressure, the elf starts to stutter a very awkward apology. Eve interrupts the scene by shouting at her colleague not to apologize to that man under any circumstances. The blonde young woman grinds her teeth in anger, realizing how much of a master Wolfram is at manipulating words. He congratulates Eve on winning the position of president, saying that the chair now belongs to her. The young man thinks that if he were in the protagonist's body, he could have ended up with her on the imperial route. He acknowledges that now they are strangers, but unfortunately his destiny took a different turn. Wolfram warns that he is leaving in case nobody else has anything to say, but he is interrupted by Eve. The girl shouts, demanding to know the real reason why he wants to continue at the academy without any perks. She expresses all her frustration and shouts, asking why he insists so much on that. The young man looks back mysteriously and starts to formulate a dramatic response for her. He states that he still possesses an unfulfilled dream in that place, and that he prefers to leave things like this, Leaving the young woman confused, he throws his jacket over his shoulder and remarks that that chair is very heavy. With a confident gesture, the young man crosses the large doors of the hall under everyone's shocked looks. Sitting in the presidential chair, the girl grinds her teeth, showing a tremendous anger toward the young man. The young man walks triumphantly through the corridors, officially starting his own journey in that game. He sports a handsome smile, knowing that now his route to becoming a store owner begins. In that magical academy, students learn various practical disciplines besides combat and magic. Everyone strives to the maximum to stand out in their favorite areas like commerce, agriculture, and arts. Depending on their dedication, many manage to accumulate large fortunes even before graduating from there. Others prove their worth by defeating terrible monsters, showing that humanity can overcome everything. The place is a true paradise of learning and opportunities for the talented youths of the empire. Various battles and intense training take place daily across the fields of the gigantic institution. The academy's imposing castle rises under the blue sky as the ideal home for all students. A friendly employee assists the young man with a nice smile, making a zero sign with her hand. Wolfram enters total despair upon seeing her reaction, unable to believe what he is hearing. The receptionist formally confirms that his bank account is zeroed out, and without a single cent, without money and without a roof over his head. He sits on the stairway, lamenting the beginning of that terrible personal nightmare. The young man gets extremely annoyed upon realizing how much the former owner of the body was a complete, clueless idiot. To make matters worse, the transaction history shows that all the money was spent on frivolous things. He laments that the savings were spent on casinos and useless magical items, leaving absolutely nothing. Suddenly, the young man realizes that perhaps some valuable item forgotten in his old dormitory might still remain. Upon arriving at the location, the young man is coldly informed that his moving process has already been fully concluded. He panics upon discovering that all his personal belongings have already been removed from the room. His suitcases are thrown out of the building, accompanied by a luxurious sword leaning against the luggage. The employee hands over the bags, thanking him for the stay before slamming the door in the young man's face. With the door closed, the young man finds himself completely alone outside with nowhere to go with his suitcases. He decides to settle in a corner near the wall of the large building to better evaluate the situation. The youth spreads on the ground some items he found in the chest, including a sword, a staff, and a magical cloak. While he analyzes the things on the ground, another student slowly approaches with a curious expression. The student asks if those items are ancient relics and shows great interest in buying them. Wolfram casts such a scary and intimidating look that it makes the other young man's heart almost stop from fear. The student screams in terror upon recognizing the former council president and enters total panic. He desperately apologizes while running far away, as fast as his legs can carry him. The young man laments the terrible reputation of the body's former owner, but admits that it is hard to get used to that. He goes back to concentrating on the valuable items he found in the suitcases. Thinking of a way to make a profit, Wolfram bites his finger thoughtfully, trying to hatch a strategy to sell those relics for a good price. He decides to go to the Dwarves Guild located inside the campus in the hope of managing to negotiate the sword. The young man offers the sword with a confident smile, stating that it is a true work of art. The dwarf blacksmith refuses the offer immediately, saying he has no interest in buying the wind weapon. Wolfram gets totally outraged and shouts, wanting to know the reason for refusing such a good proposal. The blacksmith ignores him coldly and demands that the young man leave there soon without causing any kind of confusion. He decides to try his luck at the Elves Guild, hoping they will have more interest in his relics. The young man believes the elves would never refuse a magical cloak made with the highest quality silk. To his surprise, the elf attendant also refuses the offer, leaving the young man in disbelief at the situation. The elf shows that he knows the value of the silk cloak, but maintains his firm stance of not buying anything. Wolfram despairs and shouts, arguing that that item is a masterpiece worth a true fortune. Without showing any emotion, the elf only repeats that they simply do not want to buy his item. Downcast, the young man walks through the courtyard carrying all his suitcases without understanding what is happening. He remembers that in the games he always focused on improving reputation with factions to unlock rare items. The problem is that his current reputation, with all the factions of that academy, is at the lowest level. Wolfram tries to understand the reason for so much hatred, while noticing that the dwarf blacksmith watches him from afar. The young man turns around suddenly, making a surprised sound upon catching the dwarf spying on him in a suspicious way. Caught off guard, the blacksmith gets startled upon realizing he was discovered and tries to disguise his presence. Very awkwardly, the dwarf starts to fake a cough, trying to find an excuse to justify the act. He approaches slowly with red cheeks, while staring fixedly at the shiny sword in the suitcase. Wolfram smiles, knowing dwarves cannot resist rare weapons, and asks the real reason for not buying. The dwarf crosses his arms and reveals irritantly that the problem actually is the terrible fame of Wolfram von Lohengrin. The young man is perplexed upon discovering how much the former owner of that body was hated by all people. The blacksmith explains that the news about him losing his position has already spread to all the guilds in the academy. He questions if the refusal is due to the high price, since the wind sword is still an extremely valuable item. The dwarf counters by saying that the value of millions of coins for the sword and cloak are just loose change for the guilds. He explains that things in the academy have changed, and that only the student council president's orders are followed. The blacksmith makes a mystery by mentioning that the current student council president has taken control of everything, and he compliments by saying she is determined to make the young man's of a living maze, which leaves Wolfram quite tense. With a tense smile on his face, the young man realizes his situation has become even more complicated than he imagined. He thanks the blacksmith for the sincere information and politely warns that he is already leaving there. The young man follows his path, carrying the heavy luggage under the thoughtful gaze of the dwarf blacksmith at the entrance. The dwarf blacksmith watches the young man walk away and feels that he looks strangely different from what he used to be. Sitting on a park bench, the young man lets out a long sigh, totally discouraged by the turn of things. Wolfram rests his head on his knees, lamenting that that new life is turning out to be much harder than he thought. He realizes he has lost all the academy's perks and urgently needs to find an organization to join. In the middle of his worries, his stomach starts to rumble loudly from hunger, increasing his agony even more. Completely exhausted and without strength, the youth lies down on the wooden bench, feeling the weight of physical fatigue. The sun begins to set on the horizon while he closes his eyes, feeling an uncontrollable sleep take over him. Wolfram ends up falling asleep right there on the bench, using his own arms as support for his head. In the middle of the night, the young man is awakened by a male voice calling out to him in a very calm way. Upon opening his eyes, he comes face to face with the silhouette of a mysterious man, standing right before him under the moonlight. Wolfram gets genuinely startled by that sudden presence and asks fearfully who is there in the dark. The man tries to calm him down quickly, explaining that he had zero intention of scaring him like that. Then, he hands over a bag with fresh bread, saying he figured the young man must be hungry. Surprised by the unexpected kindness, the youth accepts the food and starts eating without thinking twice. He devours the bread and drinks desperately, as if he hadn't eaten anything for several days in a row. The man comments that the young man's situation is truly deplorable for someone who used to be the great president. Wolfram tries to maintain his posture, saying he just hasn't found lodging yet, and sincerely thanks him for the food. Suddenly, the young man widens his eyes upon noticing something extremely important and asks the man to wait. He questions the name of the mysterious man, who points to himself, confused by that sudden question. The youth finally remembers the guy's identity, recalling a specific mission from his old game. He remembers that in the game, the merchant Phil asked someone to take over his bankrupt store full of debts. That problematic store was Wolfram's only salvation to manage to maintain his bond with the academy. Without wasting time, the young man shakes Phil's hand, sealing that business agreement in a desperate way. He grips the merchant's hand firmly while getting to make an offer that can't be refused. Wolfram flashes a shrewd smile and asks Phil to sell that grocery store full of debts directly to him. Phil accepts the deal on the spot and immensely thanks the young man for freeing him from that great burden. The former owner celebrates in relief, saying he will finally be able to return to his homeland in peace. The game system confirms that Wolfram has officially acquired ownership of Phil's bankrupt grocery store. However, the young man waits for some reward notification, but notices that absolutely nothing has changed. He keeps standing there behind the counter, staring into empty space, while the system repeats that nothing happened. To make matters worse, all the merchandise stocked in the store starts to rot quickly, generating a loss. In a few seconds, the grocery store goes into total bankruptcy, leaving the young man desperate and fallen on the floor with no direction. Wolfram lets out a scream of terror upon seeing the size of the financial disaster he just caused in the store. The young man wakes up startled with a jump and realizes that all that actually was just a terrible personal nightmare. He looks around and feels relieved upon seeing the grocery shelves full of fresh and intact products. Wolfram wipes the sweat from his forehead and takes a deep breath, thankful that everything was just a delusion of his mind. Suddenly, the front door opens forcefully, catching the attention of the youth, who was behind the counter. Phil enters the grocery store cheerfully and asks if the former council president managed to sleep well. He places a bundle of money on the table, leaving Wolfram confused about the origin of that amount. Phil explains that the young man will need funds to restock if he really wants to run the place. Wolfram remembers he gave his sword and valuable garments in exchange for the store, which was an excellent deal. He calculates that the real value was fair and thanks Phil in a restrained way, maintaining his noble posture. Phil warns that the building's owner demanded to meet the new store owner before signing the contract. Wolfram gets surprised and tense upon hearing that the landlord wishes to meet personally with him at the store. At that moment, a person apologizes for the delay, and Phil warns he is already leaving, letting the two be alone. The sound of firm footsteps echoes across the grocery store floor, revealing the arrival of an elegant female figure. Wolfram hears a dry but extremely beautiful voice that makes him pay immediate attention to the visitor. The young man spots a girl with long black hair that falls smoothly down to her waistline. The youth widens his eyes in shock upon immediately recognizing the identity of that mysterious woman. It is Isla Tristar, an extremely important and striking character within that game's universe. Isla is one of the best students in the magic department, and also an intermediate boss of the game's third act. Besides that, the young man remembers with much astonishment that she is also officially the fiancée of the character Wolfram. The two stare at each other in silence inside the grocery store, establishing an atmosphere of extreme tension in the place. The young woman takes the initiative and harshly demands that Wolfram say something to justify his attitude. Wolfram maintains his calm and questions her about the real reason why she went after him in that shop. Isla gestures with disdain, stating that the purchase of that humble grocery store was clearly a message to her. She asks ironically if he bought the place to ask for her help, or if that is some kind of noble order. The young man just stares at her in a serious way without saying a single word while trying to formulate a mental plan. Isla remarks with contempt that he has always been a man whose only acceptable quality was his boundless ambition. She accuses him of being a weakling who lost his position to the younger sister and who is now trying to lean on his fiancée. The elf young woman points out that there is no more space for him there and coldly demands that he retire from the academy. She reinforces her request for expulsion while Wolfram continues with his head down, maintaining mystery in his gaze. Internally, the young man enters total panic, knowing Isla is one of the most dangerous mages in the entire academy. She is the eldest daughter of a rich family and a true prodigy who masters advanced magic with mastery. He knows very well that with Wolfram's weak and debilitated body, he would be eliminated in her first serious attack. The young man mentalizes that he needs to use all the information he possesses about her in the game to manage to survive. He focuses his gaze on her, knowing the response he gives at that moment will be crucial for his destiny. Wolfram breaks the silence by calling her by her full name, which makes the girl pay immediate attention to him. He says mockingly that it would be ridiculous to think she would invest in such a simple building with no commercial value. Isla feels offended by his sarcastic comment and questions him about what he meant by that. The young man states that an important man like him would never waste time memorizing trivial buildings in that region. Isla calls him a liar and demands to know the real reason why he insisted so much on buying that grocery store. Wolfram focuses his gaze on her and replies firmly that he did all that just to satisfy his great ambition. Upon hearing the word ambition, the young woman is left completely without reaction and with her cheeks slightly flushed. She tries to recover from the shock and accuses him of being ridiculous for talking about ambition while being cornered. He flashes a confident smile and guarantees that he is not cornered and that he never gave up on his goals. Wolfram opens his arms and declares with imposition that that simple store will be the starting point of his plan. Isla gets totally confused and doesn't understand what the true purpose of using a grocery store for that is. He explains that shadows need to hide in the most secret places, which is exactly what she wanted to hear. The young man continues saying that he will use that shop as a front to recruit valuable talents to his side. She doubts the plan and questions him if he truly possesses the necessary capacity to recognize a talent. Wolfram holds a simple piece of bread and cites as an example the young druid she protects and values so much in secret. Isla widens her eyes in absolute shock upon realizing that he somehow knows about the druid's existence. He remembers the academy's prodigies like the fire, specialist freshman, and the young man with sword saint potential. The girl gets extremely trembly and nervous, demanding to know how he managed to discover that secret information. Wolfram faces her with a victorious smile on his face, asking if she still doubts his capacity for judgment. He walks through the store, explaining that he left the council just to manage to govern the entire academy from the shadows. The young man displays a diabolical and mysterious smile, very satisfied with the result of his theatrical performance. He remembers that true silent rebellion always starts in the most unlikely and hidden places of all. Isla gets fascinated by his words, blushing intensely upon realizing the enormous ambition he demonstrates. Wolfram celebrates internally for having used her striking line. Even before she could say it in the game, the girl admits to being totally impressed and unable to believe his incredible change of posture. He replies that belief is an empty word that only gains some real meaning after the results are shown. Wolfram walks up to her and makes it clear that he is not going to ask for her help, but imposes a very serious condition. The young man stares at her fixedly in a threatening way and demands that she try not to mess with his plans under any circumstances. He compliments by saying that if she dares to cross his path, he will personally take charge of eliminating her. Internally, he sounds cold from nervousness, praying that his ambitious villain act was convincing. Yahello agrees with his response with a serious look, which leaves Wolfram quite confused and distrustful. Suddenly, the young woman starts adjusting her gloves while an intense purple magical energy starts to emerge around her. She starts floating in the air, channeling rays of dark energy toward the young man, who goes into shock at the sight. Yahello challenges him intensely, telling him to go ahead and try to eliminate her if he truly has the capability. Wolfram gets totally terrified on the inside, and with a comical expression of shock before her enormous power. To the young man's surprise, the young woman deactivates her powerful lightning magic and starts removing her black gloves. She descends slowly to the ground while the purple magical aura around her body dissipates completely. Yahello stares at him seriously and challenges him one more time to try to get her out of his way if he is capable. The strong gust of wind caused by her magic messes up some shelves and scatters the grocery store products. The breads fly through the air while the young man tries to stay firm and calm in the middle of all that chaotic windstorm. The girl just watches him in silence, trying to decipher what is going on in her fiancé's mind at that moment. On the inside, Wolfram is desperate and wonders if Yahello always held so much grudge against him in the past. He tries to think of some quick excuse to manage to get out alive from that extremely dangerous situation. The young man believes his limit has been reached, and his end is very close if he fails to calm her down quickly. Suddenly, the tension atmosphere decreases when the young woman starts walking calmly toward the grocery store's exit. She admits knowing that he doesn't have the strength to beat her, which leaves the young man quite confused by that change. Yahello compliments that his determined look convinced her that his grand ambition is truly real. She opens the grocery door and warns with a mysterious look that she will keep an eye on every step he takes. As soon as the door closes, Wolfram collapses to the ground on his knees with zero strength in his legs due to the huge relief. He takes a deep breath sitting on the store carpet, celebrating the fact that he survived that scary conversation. The young man recovers his breath and promises himself that he will keep fighting to survive the next day as well. He ends up passing out from sleep and mental fatigue, sprawled in the middle of the grocery floor after the end of so much tension. The next day, the young man firmly holds the stack of bills he received from Phil with a victorious smile. He celebrates the official start of his new and awaited life as the owner of a grocery store in a fantasy world. Suddenly, a loud knock on the door startles him, and an employee announces the ordered delivery just arrived. The young delivery girl presents the millionaire bill and asks him to sign the document confirming receipt. Upon seeing who the customer is, the delivery girl goes into absolute shock upon recognizing the former council president. Wolfram stares at her with disdain and asks if the identity of the person receiving makes any difference at all. Terrified, the girl apologizes by bowing multiple times and runs away right after dropping off the orders at the store. A huge wooden box with the merchandise is placed roughly right in the middle of the grocery store hall. Wolfram leans against the large wooden box, trembling with exhaustion, but relieved that she left the delivery. He realizes that the guild accepted his request only through the legal loophole in the regulations that benefits businesses. According to local laws and the Academy's own rules, the guilds are obligated to accept commercial requests. He harshly orders the new delivery workers to bring all the merchandise inside the store immediately. That way, the orders placed by Wolfram's grocery store need to be accepted by all the guilds in the academy. The young man flashes a sideways smile, very satisfied upon seeing that he managed to bypass the boycott brilliantly. Outside the store, people comment with surprise about the arrival of so many orders at his grocery store. Watching the scene from a coffee shop window, Isla drinks her tea, impressed that he managed to get the stock. She sips the beverage calmly, preparing to watch what her fiancé's next bold moves will be. Meanwhile, in the store's kitchen, the young man starts preparing a huge pot of steaming and mysterious stew. At dawn the next day in the magic building, some students walk around staggering and with a horrible appearance. One of the students lets out a groan of pure pain and tiredness, showing that he has completely zero strength to walk. The youths look like true zombies, whispering in a dragged, outweigh the name of their department professors. In that academy, magic studies are extremely long and tiring, divided into various levels of learning. After years of dedication, few achieve a diploma, but the students who truly possess talent stay in there. They decide to knock on the doors of advanced laboratories to continue their exhaustive academic research. These stubborn students never give up on learning more, spending sleepless nights reading complex books. Many spend entire early mornings awake, helping demanding professors in their magical experiments. Others dedicate all their remaining time writing completely innovative and detailed magic theses. Due to extreme fatigue and nights without sleep, the world usually calls these people post-graduate students. Wolfram suddenly appears in front of one of them, praising the effort of the guys who look scared of him. Wearing an apron and holding a ladle, he offers a nice warm soup to help them on that very cold day. The postgraduate student starts to sniff the delicious aroma of the hot soup, forgetting the tiredness for a moment. Hungry, the student throws himself desperately toward the cup of hot soup with sparkling eyes. With a sarcastic smile, the young man warns that each cup of the special stew costs exactly 10,000 coins. He explains that customers can refill up to 3 times, which significantly reduces the price charged per portion. The postgraduate student accepts the price and starts drinking the soup in a noisy and hurried way. He gets totally amazed, feeling his body recover its energy, and asks about the dish's composition. Wolfram proudly explains that he used leftover dried fish and various fresh vegetables he had in his store. It is a delicious fish soup, very effective in combating the physical and mental exhaustion of the students. The student comments with surprise about the fact that an imperial prince works in a humble street stall. Wolfram asks with a mysterious look if they would like to see an even more interesting product. He displays a box full of colorful candies and asks if they know the value of those treats. The young man proudly guarantees that those are not ordinary candies, but delicacies made by a royal prince. The 2 students observe the box of candies with much astonishment and great curiosity in their gaze. He remembers that the luxurious candies from the imperial palace usually cost a true fortune in the market. However, the young man offers a cup full of assorted candies for a very small fraction of that real value. He makes a promotion saying they can fill the cup to the brim, respecting a maximum of 1 per day. Wolfram offers the challenge to the guys, who try to maintain their posture, even though they are crazy to taste the candies. He flashes an extremely confident smile, knowing the students won't resist that temptation. The scene changes, showing the imposing academy building under the clear light of a sunny day on campus. A veteran red-haired female student congratulates Eve for taking over the presidency of the council. Eve thanks her politely and cordially, maintaining her traditional posture of an exemplary princess. The veteran praises the magic research, while Eve tries to be nice, even though she doesn't like the girl. Internally, The princess knows the veteran only cares about politics, but decides to keep up appearances. The red-haired girl praises Eve's generosity, leaving the new president quite confused. She extends her hand and offers a small wrapped candy to the princess, who watches the treat intrigued. Eve brings the candy close to her face and smells an extremely pleasant fruit aroma coming from the small wrapper. Curious, the princess decides to put the mysterious candy in her mouth to finally taste its flavor. She widens her eyes in absolute shock upon feeling the indescribable flavor of the treat in her mouth. The princess gets completely flushed, and with an expression of pure happiness upon savoring the delicacy, the sweet and comforting flavor of the candy brings a feeling of peace and deep relaxation to her mind. Eve asks desperately about the origin of the candy, questioning if that would be some kind of academic research. The veteran gets surprised by her reaction and asks confusedly if the princess really didn't know the origin. She confesses scaredly that she thought everything was part of a plan or punishment crafted by Eve herself. Eve changes her expression completely and demands to know where the mysterious candies she tasted came from. Very trembly and sweating from nervousness, the veteran prepares to reveal the truth about the origin of the treats. The two continue the conversation in the hallway, while the atmosphere between them gets visibly more tense and serious. A small green and round candy rolls slowly across the smooth floor of the academy's large hallway. The princess watches the candy roll while the veteran continues explaining the whole story nervously. Meanwhile, outside Wolfram's grocery store, everything seems calm and quiet at sunset. Inside the store, the young man falls sprawled on the carpet from tiredness, complaining that he will have to work the next day. Suddenly, the front door is opened violently, startling the young man who was lying on the floor. Princess Eve appears at the entrance with an authoritative look, saying she finally found his hiding place. Wolfram is left without reaction seeing the girl at the door, feeling a strange sensation of repetition of that scene. He remembers that the dynasty's first emperor was a living legend, incomparable in wisdom and martial arts. All the descendants of that royal lineage inherited incredible abilities and great intelligence. But among all of them, Princess Eve was always considered the brightest and most talented of the family. She was a complete prodigy who already demonstrated enormous affinity with magic since her childhood. At 16 years old, she became an exceptional mage, respected even by postgraduate students. Her intelligence and talent were constantly compared to those of the kingdom's legendary first emperor. However, in secret, the princess is still just a teenager who loves to eat candies in hiding. She observes the dried fish on the store shelves and comments sarcastically about his new life. Eve gets surprised seeing the place and asks distrustfully what he is planning to do with that grocery store. The young man finds a conspiracy accusation very severe and prepares to reply while maintaining a confident posture. Wolfram explains with a sideways smile that the place is not a simple grocery store, but a convenience store. The princess gets intrigued by the different term, and the young man explains that it is a store with various products. He states that he bought the shop legally and questions her about the reason she is invading his space. Eve points her finger harshly and demands to see the contract, proving the legal negotiation of that establishment. The princess holds the paper with hands trembling from so much anger upon seeing the contract is truly official and valid. She shouts unconvinced, saying that that can't be true, while he counters calmly that things are like that. Eve slams her hands on the counter and accuses him of tampering with the food somehow to manage to sell to the students. He presents an official report from the magic department and ironizes, asking if she doubts the student's expertise. The young woman gets totally frustrated and without arguments while Wolfram asks her to retire if she has no complaints. She insists on the interrogation and demands to know the truth about the mysterious candies the veterans bought at the store. Eve admits she also tasted the treats brought by the students and that she was impressed by their quality. She accuses him of using illegal funds to get such refined treats that surpass the royal palace's candies. Wolfram questions her if the candy was really tasty, and she admits, blushing, that the flavor was incredibly superior. The young man reveals naturally that he himself cultivated the fruits used to make the candies, leaving her confused. He explains that the entire cultivation and production process was done by himself on that grocery store's lands. Wolfram points to the new apple saplings he ordered from the Elves Guild to start his plantation. A beautiful and shiny red apple is harvested directly from the branch of one of the trees cultivated in the backyard. The young man extends the fresh fruit toward the princess, offering it so she can taste the cultivation's quality. Eve watches the fruit distrustfully, but can't resist the temptation to experience that beautiful apple. She takes a juicy bite of the apple, feeling all the sweet and fresh flavor of the fruit invade her palate. The young man watches her fixedly, immediately recognizing that classic expression she makes when eating candies in the game. Eva's cute expression was her strong charm point in the game, although the young man feels a slight annoyance with that. He wonders why he feels so annoyed seeing that scene, pondering a rejection from the former Wolfram's body. Wolfram calls her by name in a serious way, making the princess swallow the piece quickly and get very awkward. He offers a bag full of apples for a special discounted price in case she wants to take them to the dormitory. Feeling extremely provoked, the princess grinds her teeth in anger, accumulating even more grudge against the young man. Back in the council room, the elf Sylvia enters the place and notices a strange behavior in the princess. The elf counselor comments that the council room has an extremely strong and pleasant sweet aroma. Eve disguises her nervousness with a candy in her mouth, thinking of savoring the treat in a silent and discreet way. She plans to bankrupt Wolfram by buying his entire stock of candies before finally eliminating him for good. The princess puts another treat in her mouth, savoring each piece with an indescribable and discreet pleasure. Sylvia watches the scene with extreme distrust, not understanding the reason for so much sudden joy in the princess. Wolfram remembers when he planted the new apple saplings he bought directly from the Elves Guild. He applied a special fertilizer composed of water mixed with a high-quality healing potion. Thanks to the differentiated treatment, the plants grew at a frighteningly fast rate in the store's backyard. Besides that, the young man used a music box with motivational phrases to accelerate the sapling's development. That music box was considered a useless item in the game, created just to calm stressed students down. However, the item possessed a hidden secret that made the surrounding plants grow much bigger and tastier. As a result of this innovative process, the harvested apples were gigantic, extremely shiny, and sweet. For production, the young man mixed the cooked and mashed fruits in a large boiling pot on the store's stove. He stirred the mixture patiently, waiting for the exact boiling point to start the molding process. Then, he added a secret ingredient of edible slime, making the mixture homogeneous and malleable. Finally, he removed the already hardened candies from the silicone molds and started packing each one by hand. With that, the production of Wolfram's famous candies that conquered even the princess was finalized. A large wicker basket full of colorful and shiny candies is placed on the store's main counter. Exhausted, the young man collapses on the grocery store floor, complaining about his extremely low physical stamina for hard labor. Suddenly, the front door opens, emitting a sharp creaking sound that echoes throughout the silent environment. Wolfram warns tiredly that the grocery store is already closed, but freezes upon seeing the elegant boots of the person who just entered. Isla sighs tiredly, saying she no longer has the strength to keep working. She suddenly picks Wolfram up in her arms as if he weighed absolutely nothing. The girl looks closely at him and asks if the young man is really okay. He replies that he is fine while remaining shocked by her monstrous strength attributes. She asks the reason for the visit, and he says with a smile that he is impressed by her ambition. Isla comments that focusing on the post-graduate students was a simply brilliant strategy. Wolfram just listens while she praises the connections he made with the country's future prodigies. Feeling a sweet smell in the air, the young man explains that they are the apple candies and offers some to her. The purple-haired girl grabs one of the treats and timidly puts it in her mouth to taste. Her cheeks blush and she gets surprised by the incredibly marvelous flavor of the candy. Isla says she respects the young man and won't ask for the recipe. While he thinks he wouldn't even have the strength to tell it, she decides to help Wolfram get back on his feet and asks him to state exactly what he wants as aid. The young man thinks he needs to start cultivating and asks her for a detailed map of the Academy's eastern forest. Sometime later, the scene changes to the imposing entrance of the Academy's Knights Department. At the mission reception, the green-haired attendant starts welcoming the new visitor. She gets tremendously startled and screams upon recognizing the blonde-haired young man right in front of her. Stuttering, she asks Wolfram's request, and he asks for a bodyguard for an expedition into the eastern forest. She jots down the work payment conditions and hands over a list of available students for the task. Knowing his terrible reputation, the young man knows he needs to choose the bodyguard with a lot of caution. He suddenly widens his eyes upon finding a specific name on that student list. With a sideways smile, the youth celebrates having found an extremely reliable escort for the mission. A short-haired girl arrives running and apologizes for keeping her client waiting. She energetically introduces herself as Nefterian and says he can simply call her Nefti. Wolfram greets her cordially, knowing very well what that girl's nickname was among players. The young woman was known as the Queen of the Broke, and is quite surprised upon realizing who her contractor is. Meanwhile, the two settle at a table inside the establishment to discuss the details. Wolfram pretends not to remember well, and asks again what the young warrior's full name is. She patiently repeats her name and reinforces that he can just call her by her short nickname. He tells her not to be so formal, but the girl insists on treating him with respect for being her employer. The young man observes the young woman's firm attitude and flashes a slight sideways smile, showing he is satisfied. She maintains an impeccable posture with eyes full of conviction, exactly like it happened inside the game. Nefti was designed as a hardworking young woman who carries the burden of paying all her family's debts. Because of extreme poverty, there was even a sad rumor that she ate grass with resin to survive. Despite that, she refuses to do dirty work and seeks to pay her debts only with honest missions. Thanks to this strong character, the young man knows he doesn't need to worry about extortion or betrayal from her part. Nefti then draws her employer's attention and enthusiastically asks what her first task will be. Wolfram explains that they are going to explore the eastern forest and confirms that the hourly wage will be the minimum. Upon hearing the minimum wage amount, the girl makes a gloomy expression, leaving the young man quite confused. He adds that he will also provide up to 2 low-level healing potions in case she ends up getting hurt. Nefti replies that she understood, but her discouraged expression makes it clear she wasn't happy with that at all. To try to improve the situation, the youth guarantees that he will pay for all her meals with quality food. Upon hearing about the free food, she accepts on the spot and swears on her honor that she will make an absolutely perfect escort. Then, Wolfram asks how she would like to handle the classic count and run strategy in the forest. That strategy consists of retreating immediately as soon as the group encounters a specific number of monsters. That way, they avoid unnecessary combat and guarantee safety throughout the entire exploration of the place. The young man says the limit will be 5 monsters, but promises a cash bonus for each extra creature. She accepts the imposed conditions, and Wolfram warns that he has only one special condition for that mission. The young warrior warns that if the work violates the chivalry code, she will leave at that very moment. Wolfram just lets out a confident grunt and gets up from the table to start packing his equipment. He says to go right now because he doesn't want to waste time. And the two finally depart toward the eastern forest. Nefty accepts the mission with enthusiasm and happily shouts that she is ready to start. While they walk through the dense forest, it is possible to hear some sounds of extreme fatigue and heavy breathing. Wolfram asks to slow the pace down while the girl rejoices because walking slowly guarantees more paid work hours. The eastern forest is a safe place for beginners, inhabited mainly by weak slimes and small goblins. With a quick movement of her sword, the warrior easily defeats a yellow slime that appears in the path. She announces excitedly that that was the first elimination on the list. While the young man thinks even he could win, they finally arrive at the bean garden, an isolated place where colorful seeds of all types grow. Wolfram gets relieved that they reached the destination without busting the monster limit and observes the rare plants. He confirms that that is the correct place and warns that they must start working on the cultivation immediately. The girl gets completely shocked upon seeing an imperial lineage noble harvesting beans directly from the ground. The young man asks for help with the harvest, but she refuses, stating that that type of service is not in her contract. He offers a generous hourly payment, and she changes her mind immediately, saying harvesting is her specialty. With eyes shining with joy, the girl grabs a large shining blue pod to start her work. He guides the warrior to harvest with extreme care so as not to damage the quality of those valuable seeds. Nefty watches the young man in silence, thinking that the former president is very different from the terrible rumors she heard. After some time of joint flow, they manage to fill 2 entire baskets with very colorful beans. Wolfram sighs tiredly and suggests taking a break to eat while the girl enthusiastically agrees with the idea. She starts to salivate from hunger, imagining the incredible meal that would be prepared personally by an imperial prince. The young man extends his hand and hands her an extremely simple and ordinary piece of black bread. The warrior gets disappointed upon seeing the bread, but he counters by asking if she has any problem with that food. She says everything is fine, but starts drawing her sword, leaving the young man quite worried about her reaction. To calm the moods down, Wolfram promises to show a culinary trick that will greatly improve the flavor of that dry bread. He shows some specific seeds, explaining that they are vanilla milk and bubble beans. The young man throws all the seeds inside a metal cup and asks her what she thinks will happen. Then, he starts crushing and grinding the seeds using a spoon with plenty of force and determination. He closes the metal container and starts shaking the mixture vigorously to make the content homogeneous. Upon opening the cup, a creamy and white substance emerges, revealing an incredibly perfect and fluffy whipped cream. He places a very generous spoonful of that sweet cream on top of the girl's piece of black bread. With a friendly look, the young man extends the modified food and invites the young warrior to taste his creation. The girl watches the dish with quite a bit of timidity, smelling the sweet aroma of the cream placed on the bread. Without hesitating anymore, she takes a big bite, devouring the food with extreme will and curiosity. Her eyes widen instantly upon feeling that explosion of marvelous flavors in her mouth. The young man comments that that trick improves any bad bread, while noticing that the girl starts to cry, shedding tears of joy. She praises the incredible flavor of the food, leaving Wolfram surprised by so much emotion. He gets a bit awkward with her exaggerated reaction and asks her to calm down once and for all. Nefty keeps eating while lamenting about her old grass diet, confirming the youth's suspicions. Suddenly, Wolfram's eyes start to shine with an intense and mysterious light that emerges around him. A large and gleaming system notification screen appears right in front of the young man, revealing a great achievement. The message congratulates the young man for achieving a critical success upon performing the legendary combination of seeds. Wolfram gets completely shocked, unable to believe the incredible achievement notification he received. The notice reinforces that he was the first person in the entire game world to perform that specific combination. He murmurs incredulously upon realizing he achieved an unprecedented feat that even old players didn't know about. The system confirms that he unlocked a legendary title and gained the power to better sense the flavor of seeds. A magical and golden light starts to emanate directly from the palm of his hand, indicating the reward's receipt. As a special prize for his great feat, he receives an extremely powerful level 7 random seed. He observes the mystic bean in his hand, knowing that valuable item can completely change his plans. At the end of the day, the sun begins to set on the horizon, painting the forest sky with reddish twilight tones. The two arrive at the forest's exit portal, and Wolfram thanks the girl for her excellent escort work. She highly praises the offered food and says joyfully that that was the best meal of her entire life. She comments that she always thought beans were dangerous and poisonous, but today's experience changed her view. She says, crying, that she never imagined that the combination of those seeds would result in something so incredibly delicious. Wolfram gets in shock upon hearing her say that that was the first time in her life she saw a technique of that type. The young man asks her if the method of combining seeds is actually unknown to absolutely anybody. She confirms, explaining that there are hundreds of varieties, and nobody cares to try making mixtures with them. Wolfram gets completely paralyzed, and in shock upon realizing the surprising reality of that fantasy world. He wonders incredulously if really no person even considered trying to make that simple combination before him. He finally understands the reason for receiving that unprecedented system reward for being the technique's pioneer. Back at his convenience store, the young man starts organizing some paper bags on the wooden counter. The young man starts reflecting and mentally summarizing all the important information he gathered up to that moment. He remembers that the Academy's distribution network is terrible and products need to be made in a handmade way. Because of that, potions and equipment cost 10 or even 100 times more expensive than he remembered in the original game. The second point is that adventures are so limited that nobody ever tried making that seed combination. He recalls when he asked if students really did missions and explorations out of pure free will. Nefty replied that that was a strange question since nobody would risk their life outside without necessity. At that moment, the young man realized a fundamental detail about the defensive behavior of that world's inhabitants. He concludes that almost nothing was discovered in the place simply because people have an extreme fear of adventuring. In the original game, adventures and monster combat seemed like something extremely easy and simple to do. However, in reality, everyone knows they only have one life, and nobody wants to get hurt in dangerous battles. Due to this constant fear, most people prefer just protecting what they already have instead of seeking the unknown. He knows that getting involved in the original protagonist's dangerous adventures will certainly cause his own demise. Wolfram outlines the plan to keep his store active and try to learn at least one useful skill before graduating. He then raises 3 fingers to highlight what his main and most important goal is from then on. The ultimate objective is to avoid the main story as much as possible and enjoy a peaceful and quiet life at the academy. Suddenly, his store's door opens and his blonde sister appears, demanding that he get involved in her problems. Wolfram sighs, very discouraged, and asks with disdain what exactly she wants with him early in the morning. She throws some papers on the counter and shouts furiously, asking how he had the courage to spend the budget like that. The young man widens his eyes, completely shocked upon realizing she discovered the records of his old expenses. The body's former owner spent an absurd amount of public money, leaving the current Wolfram not knowing what to say. With a gloomy and scary aura, the princess asks what she should do to save this year's destroyed finances. To try to calm the young woman down, he invites her in and promises to prepare a complimentary, refreshing drink. He presents his new strawberry drink creation, which he plans to use as his store's next big product. She holds the cup and asks the meaning of convenience store, and he explains that the focus is helping all students. The princess gets distrustful of that generous response, while take a small sip of the fresh strawberry drink. Suddenly, the blonde young woman interrupts her sip and widens her eyes with an expression of absolute and immediate surprise. Wolfram suggests she use her ice magic to freeze the drink a bit, guaranteeing the flavor's perfect point. She questions if the convenience store shouldn't deliver the product already chilled instead of making the customer freeze it. He flashes an awkward smile and says he can't do that because his current magical power level is extremely low. The princess lets out a long sigh of tiredness in the face of her older brother's magical weakness and incompetence. Without saying anything else, she extends her hand with the black glove and uses her own ice magic to chill the strawberry cup. The strawberry cup starts freezing slightly, creating a very refreshing, slushy, creamy consistency. The princess brings the red and white straw to her lips and takes a deep sip of the chilled strawberry beverage. She widens her eyes, completely amazed by the indescribable sweetness and refreshing nature of that new blend. She lets out a cute little giggle of pure satisfaction while he gets awkward and asks her to quiet down once and for all. In a few seconds, the blonde young woman manages to devour the entire strawberry drink, leaving the glass cup totally empty. She disguises it by clearing her throat and praises the flavor, asking for what price she plans to sell that sweet delicacy. She thinks the price is high and suggests he save the product to sell at the school's freshman welcome festival. He replies that he will think about the idea, but the girl gets annoyed by the fact that he didn't thank her advice politely. The blonde-haired young man watches her in silence with a somewhat confused expression. Not understanding the reason for her irritation, she grabs another cup and drinks quickly, thinking about how wonderfully genuine that strawberry recipe is. Finally, she turns her face to the side with flushed cheeks, letting out a grunt to disguise her embarrassment. He flashes a wide smile of satisfaction, knowing he managed to win over another loyal customer with his recipes. He decides not to charge for the drink, but asks her to buy some candies while she complains she has no money. She says the plan of selling the shakes can save the year's accounts, and the young man wishes her good luck on the task. The princess warns that the student council has changed a lot and asks him to just keep taking care of his little shop in peace. Wolfram smiles and replies in a relaxed way, stating that that is exactly his biggest desire at that moment. Despite the friendly words, a spark of silent rivalry still emerges in the tense gaze between the two siblings. After his sister's departure, the young man gets thoughtful and silence takes over the entire environment of his small store. She stops at the door to ask one last question, while Wolfram asks to be quick since he has many tasks. The young man questions her directly about the identity of the new freshman representative student who entered that year. The princess distrusts that sudden question and stares at him with a serious look, wanting to know the reason for the interest. He says it's just curiosity, and she reveals that surprisingly, this year's representative is an ordinary commoner. She reveals that the young commoner's name is Kelterus, awakening deep memories in the protagonist's mind. Wolfram remembers the cheerful image of the red-haired young man who was the original hero of all that story. He knows the arrival of that hero marks the beginning of dangerous events, and that he needs to keep his distance from everything. Time passes quickly at the academy, and the quiet days start giving way to a new and important stage. The main plot of the game he reincarnated in is about to start with all characters in their positions. However, now there is a big variable in the middle of everything, which is an unexpected simple convenience store owner. In another corner of the academy, some people start planning their next steps aiming at the school festival. A tasty beverage is poured carefully into a glass cup, preparing the refreshments that would be served soon. A young silver-haired assistant works hard on the preparation, organizing each of the drinks on the counter. Various students cheerfully thank the prince for the free distribution of fresh drinks in the courtyard. The light-haired young man observes the movement, knowing the freshman orientation ceremony will kick off the plot. He remembers that in the original game, the world's destiny changed completely depending on which heroine the player chose. One of the classic game route options was choosing the magic department and focusing on the romance with Princess Eve. By following that path, the player reached the royal knight happy ending, becoming the princess's absolute protector. However, there were also total ruin endings, caused mainly by a heroine who created almost all defeats. The destiny of that entire reality depended exclusively on the decisions the hero would make during his journey. He mentally wishes good luck to the hero, while deciding to focus only on his convenience business in peace. Back to reality, the blonde-haired youth hears a familiar voice asking if he already hit the day's targets. Purple-haired Isla watches him and comments confidently that his rebellion is getting closer and closer to happening. He denies any intention of revolt in a calm way and asks what important matter she came to deal with there. The girl lets out a sigh and pops a candy in her mouth, looking a bit tired or worried about something specific. She reveals with a discouraged countenance that she was chosen as the official education representative for the new students. Wolfram understands the situation, remembering she was selected for the role for being the third year's second best student. Isla complains, saying she considers that custom barbaric and promises to end the rule as soon as her revolution starts. That role requires her to face the best freshmen in an exhibition duel to teach the academy's newbies a lesson. In the original game, that opening duel was the crucial event that triggered the most important narrative turns. During combat, the rookie managed to land a direct blow that scratched the veteran's face, leaving her surprised. Although the hero ended up defeated in the duel, he celebrated proudly for managing to land at least one attack on her. The hero fell exhausted to the ground, but with a big smile on his face, demonstrating all his rapid evolution potential. Even winning the combat, the veteran got extremely shaken by the fact that a mere rookie reached her defense. With her pride wounded and dominated by despair, she ended up becoming the feared leader of the game's dangerous villain faction. The blonde-haired young man watches the girl and thinks that that dangerous future villain is currently his official fiancé. Isla asks what he plans to do at the orientation, and the young man reveals he intends to set up a sales booth there. She remembers booths have a daily operating time limit and questions him about what he will do after closing. Replies mysteriously and says she should worry more about herself than about his business. He knows if she corrupts, the risk of his weak body being pierced by her magical spears increases a lot. To guarantee his own safety, the best option is to make her win the duel in an absolute way and without scratches. He recalls she wanted to see his potential and states he is also eager to see his fiancé shine in combat. She replies with a challenging tone, saying she doubts he is capable of keeping up with her true potential. Wolfram stares closely right at her and questions whether she has the necessary qualification for that important task. The girl looks at him with a gloomy expression and asks angrily if he is really doubting her great capability. She proudly reminds him that she is the third year's second best student and the department's feared Black Crystal Witch. The young man smiles and jokes by saying that in the Academy's history, there have already been 300 people in that exact vice position. He points to his exclusive and luxury handmade products that have never existed before in that entire region. Wolfram states that with these unprecedented creations, he proved his total originality for the first time in 300 years. She grinds her teeth, extremely annoyed for not being able to find any valid argument to counter the young man. Isla asks what he means, and the youth comments on the rumors of the new commoner freshman's great talent. The girl questions him seriously if he thinks she is going to lose, and the young man denies it immediately while staying calm. He ponders that if she doesn't win that duel in a perfect way, the result will be seen as a shame for her family. Suddenly, a magical and scary energy starts to emanate from the young fiancé, leaving the environment tense and heavy. She accepts the challenge with determination and stands up at once, willing to prove all her true worth in the duel. Isla guarantees in a scary way that she will defeat the rookie with just a single blow and tells him to watch everything closely. Wolfram swallows hard and feels a chill seeing the fury in the bright and intimidating eyes of his fiancé. Without saying anything else, she turns her back and starts walking toward the exit, while maintaining her imposing posture. The convenience store door closes with a loud bang, echoing through the entire space that was previously tense. The young man is left alone in the place watching the entrance, and lets out a sigh to relieve all that pressure of the moment. He suddenly notices a funny detail and wonders if she really left without paying for the drink she had. Besides that, he notices that the girl left a mysterious paper on the table before running away like that. Upon analyzing the paper, he realizes it is an entry ticket to the festival, valid for 2 people. Holding the ticket, the youth gets confused and concludes that that girl's attitudes are a true mystery. Sometime later, the scene changes, showing the interior of the kitchen with the organized baking utensils. He plans to use the new student orientation to promote his store and conquer the attention of the entire academy. The young man analyzes the options, but feels that a main standout product is still missing to draw plenty of attention. Although the shake is excellent, he knows there is a daily limit to the amount of rare seeds he manages to harvest. He then considers the idea of baking fresh breads and putting cream on top to create the perfect signature product. Wolfram starts kneading the bread dough with plenty of energy, but soon feels a terrible pain in his weak arms. He screams in pain upon suffering an immediate cramp due to his very low physical stamina, which is at level 2. The situation gets even worse when the young man starts feeling sick from extreme fatigue just by stirring that light dough. The next day, the sun shines brightly in the blue sky, indicating the start of a new busy journey on campus. Sitting on a wooden bench, the young man questions himself whether he will manage to run a booth with that weak energy of his. He complains of tiredness for having become completely exhausted after walking for only 30 minutes around the place. Lying on his back, the young man opens his eyes slowly and notices a mysterious presence approaching his bench. To his surprise, young Nefty is fallen on the ground crying because she can't eat grass anymore after tasting his sweet bread. Wolfram calls her by name in a calm way, making the tearful girl look up with a surprised expression. He stands before her and questions her seriously about the reason she is in such a deplorable situation. The short-haired warrior blinks her tear filled eyes and murmurs his name in a quite confused way. Suddenly, she seems to recover consciousness and jumps backward, totally startled upon realizing who is there. Thinking she is going crazy, she starts waving her hands and screams for the young man's supposed hallucination to leave soon. The young man calmly warns that he is not a hallucination, making the girl rub her eyes and stare at him with plenty of doubt. He ironizes the term she used, confirming that he is really the actual young man of flesh and bone right before her. Nefti kneels down quickly, apologizing 1,000 times for the misunderstanding while he asks what she was doing. She lies, saying she was just meditating, but the young man counters by saying she looked hungry and suffering from agony. The girl's face turns totally red with embarrassment, while he pretends to accept that lame excuse. Nefti timidly gathers courage and asks if he has more of that sweet bread and how much it would cost to buy some. The blonde-haired young man stares at her sideways with a serious and analytical look upon noticing a great opportunity arising. A quite shrewd sideways smile appears on his face as he plans how to use that situation to his advantage in business. He says it isn't expensive, but questions her if she has money since she sent all her savings back home. He proposes that she help him in exchange for food, but the warrior warns that she will never do any kind of dirty work. He explains that the job is just helping him sell items at the festival, but she distrusts his noble intentions. He offers a good salary of 10,000 rin with extra payment, and at least one delicious cream bread as a meal. Faced with that excellent proposal, the defender of justice kneels down, bowing totally in a sign of absolute surrender. The young man recalls that in the game's original story, there was a very striking character in the Knights College. It was a very strong and exemplary veteran known for bravely wielding the legendary sword of conviction. Being a commoner, she acted as a great mentor to the hero, and her popularity among game fans was gigantic. This respected character holding the title of Sword of Conviction was actually Nefti herself in a pink apron. However, at the moment she seemed possessed by a demonic and bizarre hunger, asking fixedly when dinner would be. Wolfram watches her, totally terrified, mentally wondering if he ended up corrupting the great heroine with food. He focuses again on his pastry work and notices that the bread dough they prepared has already rested enough. He uses a small metal cylinder to press the middle of each dough and carefully remove the central part of each one. Nefti gets desperate, thinking he is going to waste the scraps, but he explains he will use the pieces for other sweets. Entrusting the rest of the kneading work to the girl, she starts mixing everything with a frighteningly fast speed. In a few seconds, she finishes the task with perfection, leaving the youth shocked by so much speed and manual agility. Then, he shows the next step of the special recipe, which consists of frying the dough rings in hot oil. The donuts start to brown in the bubbling pan, creating an extremely appetizing appearance and a pleasant aroma. Wolfram suddenly looks away and notices something strange and scary happening right beside him in the kitchen. Nefti is drooling uncontrollably with eyes shining from hunger, looking like a starving monster without control. She extends her hand toward the boiling pan, totally hypnotized by the marvelous smell of the fried sweets. The young man gets startled by that savage attitude and warns her to be careful not end up suffering a burn. She replies dramatically that she doesn't fear hot oil while he asks her not to use heroic phrases at that time. He removes the golden donuts from the fire and asks her to watch the sweets while he gets the final ingredients. As soon as she is left alone watching the tray, the girl starts crying quietly with her stomach rumbling from so much hunger. She laments in tears for not being able to eat any sweet and mentally accuses the young man of being the Academy's worst villain. Taken by despair, she draws her sword against the sweets, but Wolfram warns that if she attacks, she won't receive her salary. Scared, She puts the weapon away immediately back into the sheath and says with a flushed face that it was all just a big misunderstanding. The young man asks for calm and tells her to just watch what he will do using some pastry bags full of cream. He makes a small hole in the side of the fried sweet and inserts the tip of the bag to start the filling process. Nefta gets amazed with shining eyes upon seeing the sweet cream, completely filling the inside of the dough. Wolfram announces that the new filled sweets are finished and places them on a large wooden tray. The girl gets amazed by the beauty of those shiny donuts covered with a thin layer of sweet sugar. She praises the work, saying she has never seen anything so pretty, and asks what the official name of that culinary work of art is. With her mouth watering, the young woman repeats the name of the sweet, amazed by every perfect detail of that cream donut. She deeply laments the fact that she helped produce that culinary marvel and couldn't take a single bite. She remembers the meal promise and creates hopes, but soon gives up, thinking it would be something too good to be true. She thinks she shouldn't expect to get such a luxurious and expensive sweet as a gift. But her stomach keeps rumbling from hunger, not enduring the temptation anymore. The warrior joins her hands and begs with tears in her eyes for just a piece of the sweet. Wolfram extends the fresh sweets and asks her to try all of them, so she can give her sincere opinion on the flavor. With a gentle smile on his face, the blonde-haired young man invites her to savor a donut of each filling type. The girl's face lights up with pure happiness, and she lets out a cry of joy upon realizing she really will be able to eat. She immensely thanks him for the delicious food and bites the sweet bread with extreme will and satisfaction in her heart. Wolfram also grabs one of the filled donuts and takes a silent bite to evaluate the quality of his own recipe. He gets quite satisfied with the result and concludes that the sweet is perfect to be successfully sold at the booth. However, the young man reflects that eating too many sweets can be a bit tiring for customers after some time of consumption. He observes that the girl is drinking something in the cup and gets curious, wanting to know what she is having alongside the bread. Upon noticing the cup, the blonde-haired youth has a genial idea to create a perfect accompaniment for his donuts. The short-haired warrior gets surprised and enthusiastic upon seeing the bright expression that appears on her boss's face. Nefti says cheerfully that she judged the young man poorly, and that now she realizes he is a good-hearted and very generous person. She praises the young man, saying he is thoughtful while he asks her to stop talking nonsense and give her opinion already. Holding a wooden clipboard and a writing feather, he formally asks what her opinion on the sweet is. She replies that she found the sweet a bit less sugary, but incredibly tasty, and the young man jots down the observations on paper. Wolfram asks about the sugar donut, and Nefti replies that although it had no filling, it was sweet and delicious. He jots down the details on the clipboard while asking how the flavor of the strawberry cream donut was. The young man stays in silence for a moment and right after asks what she thought of the fresh cream donut. The girl flashes a huge happy smile and enthusiastically replies that that sweet was also marvelous. Wolfram slaps his hand on the desk, disappointed upon realizing he shouldn't expect a refined critique from Nefti. Nefti asks what she should do now, suggesting hunting a monster, but the young man warns it won't be necessary. The youth explains that the donuts are for the freshman welcome party, and Nefti guarantees everyone will love them. Wolfram states seriously that the street booth is an extension of his store, and that everyone must be able to eat the sweet. He explains proudly that the true identity of a convenience store is serving everyone in a simple way. The young man surprises the assistant by directly asking what a fair price to charge for each donut would be. Wolfram asks her to think about ordinary students who spend a fortune to finally arrive at the famous academy. He reinforces the question, wanting to know what amount would be fair, so these youths can buy the sweet and cheer up. Nefty gets extremely emotional with the focused look and the great consideration her boss demonstrates having for everyone. The young woman starts laughing quietly, leaving the blonde boss quite confused and not understanding that sudden reaction. She confesses that she judged him poorly and suggests the ideal price for each fried sweet shouldn't exceed 5,000 rin. The big day of the Eve festival finally arrives, and the academy students gather in the huge combat arena. Some arrogant veterans watch the crowd, commenting mockingly that the freshmen are just beginners. Various students start gossiping angrily upon realizing Wolfram is present at the festival location. The blonde gets quite uncomfortable upon noticing that being surrounded by so many people with a grudge against him is dangerous. He decides to walk away quickly from there before the tension increases and someone tries to pull something crazy against him. Suddenly, beautiful Isla appears with her arms crossed, revealing she heard rumors about the street booth he is going to open. The young woman with long purple hair asks directly if her fiancé went to the location to be able to find her. Wolfram totally breaks the mood by replying in a cold and direct way that it wasn't because of her that he showed up there. Isla falls into absolute silence, and with an incredibly angry expression after receiving that so dry response, she repeats the question in a paused way, wanting a better answer about the reason he is at the festival. The blonde continues with his direct attitude and insists on saying he didn't go there to visit her, leaving the mood tense. He explains he was just observing the new students to study his future customers and is going to prepare the store. The fiancé murmurs that she understood the situation, while a gloomy aura of irritation starts to emerge around her. Wolfram warns he is already leaving and invites her to visit his booth, which will be located in the Commoner district. She asks if he is going to watch her combat training, but he calmly replies that he will only go if he has time. Isla gets indignant, remembering he demanded a perfect victory, but now says he might not even watch the clash. She demands a convincing explanation, while the young man desperately tries to think of a response to save himself. He uses his intelligence to say she would already win just with her skill, and that there is no need to see the obvious. The purple-haired girl gets completely in shock and without reaction before her fiancé's unexpected compliment. The blonde continues with his flattering speech, stating that her rebellion will be the most meticulous and perfect all. Isla turns totally red with embarrassment and agrees cheerfully, saying he really knows her very well. Wolfram concludes by saying that since the result is already decided, the presence of spectators won't change the victory at all. The girl laughs with happiness while he gets exhausted, wondering what on earth the term wings of rebellion means. She asks if he met her opponent, and the youth confirms, describing him as a red-haired youth with a farmer's face. Wolfram asks if she noticed anything unusual in the opponent, like the equipment or the weapon he was carrying. Isla starts to recall and mentions that the red-haired youth carried a large sword with a blood-red pommel. The young man goes on alert and asks if it was a very long two-handed sword, and the fiancé confirms that yes. Wolfram assumes an extremely serious expression and warns his fiancé to be very careful with his attack. Isla gets surprised by her fiancé's sudden change of tone and watches him with quite a bit of attention and curiosity. The blonde walks through the streets of the busy academy town, thinking about the red opponent's dangerous weapon. He gets quite worried upon realizing that powerful weapon shouldn't appear so early in the story. That two-handed sword should only emerge in the game's second act, and the youth doesn't understand how the rival got it. The young man prays that the warning he gave is enough, and that his fiancé manages to dodge the dangerous attacks. Suddenly, the blonde is interrupted in his thoughts upon spotting his assistant watching him from a balcony. Wearing light gym clothes, she greets him cheerfully, warning that all preparations have already been finalized. Some students start whispering upon seeing the respected Nefta talking right beside the problematic Wolfram. People find it very bizarre to see a girl of such exemplary conduct walking with someone of bad fame across the academy. Wolfram just grunts with disdain while the young woman watches him, worried about the other students' reaction. He strikes a dramatic pose, ironizing the fact that the famous warrior of conviction wants to give him moral lessons. The assistant gets totally confused by the boss's dramatic act, while he says he will accept her suggestion. Nefti notices everyone around keeps commenting about them, and gets a bit embarrassed with all the attention. She awkwardly thanks her boss for accepting her price idea, while the young man just grunts in a cold way. Wolfram asks if the fryer is already hot enough to start, and the assistant confirms immediately. The blonde-haired youth says he will start the work with a special recipe, leaving his helper scared. She warns that that recipe is very dangerous and can ruin the other boots, but he promises a salary bonus. The boss offers 30% of all net profit, and she starts doing math in absolute silence. Upon hearing the millionaire profit proposal, the warrior slams her hand hard on the table. Taken by an enormous motivation, she kneels down immediately, declaring absolute loyalty to the blonde young man, motivated by the great financial reward. Wolfram lets out a quite mischievous smile upon realizing his helper is totally motivated to work. With eyes shining with determination, she guarantees she will deliver her best, so that everything is an absolute success. The sun begins to set on the horizon, illuminating the large, busy streets full of festival booths. A man in glasses walks tiredly down the stairs, lamenting the exhausting day and wishing for something to relieve his fatigue. Suddenly, the young man feels a mysterious aroma and stops midway with a quite intrigued expression. He turns toward a booth that emits an intense golden glow and a large amount of smelly smoke. The bespectacled youth gets completely shocked and doesn't understand what that marvelous light coming from the establishment is. He screams, amazed upon feeling the sweet and savory aroma invade his senses and comfort his tired soul. Wolfram serves customers with extreme elegance, while the bespectacled man approaches, totally hypnotized. Several other students also approach the counter, sniffing the marvelous smell with faces of pure satisfaction. The customer anxiously asks what that fantastic sweet is, and the blonde replies with a calm and friendly smile. The youth proudly presents the delicious baked sweet, explaining that it is called Hill Manju bun. The crowd of hungry students starts shouting desperately, wanting to buy several bags of the baked bun. Orders start pouring in nonstop at a frenetic pace, and Wolfram calls his assistant to help with service. With incredible speed, Nefti uses her skills to catch fried sweets in the air with extreme agility. She prepares the trays of filled donuts at high speed, leaving all customers totally impressed. The academy youths look amazed at the bread with a hole in the middle, wondering who had the brilliant idea to fry it. The booth gets completely packed with dozens of people shouting to secure their donuts and sweet buns. A red-haired girl and a blonde boy approach the counter, looking a bit shy and holding some coins. Wolfram notices the hesitation of the two freshman youths and kindly asks if they found the sweets priced too expensive. He reassures the freshmen, explaining with a smile that the booth is offering a half-price discount for them. Two freshmen's eyes shine with happiness, and they celebrate a lot upon realizing they will be able to buy the sweets. Several other new students join the line, anxious to try the marvelous bun with cherry topping. The blonde laughs mentally upon noticing his discount strategy for commoners is yielding a fantastic profit for the store. After a lot of frenetic work, the movement finally slows down, and the duo decides to take a break to rest. Nefti eats one of the buns, praising the effort of her boss, who is totally exhausted and sprawled on the floor from tiredness. The warrior comments cheerfully that they are going to sell out while the young man asks, exhausted, for her to stop eating the stock. Suddenly, a huge noise of cheering crowds starts echoing, coming directly from the festival's grand combat arena. Nefti looks toward the stadium, commenting that something very interesting must be happening in the freshman training. Wolfram gets quite serious upon realizing his fiancée's clash against the powerful opponent should start soon. In the arena, the crowd screams wildly, demonstrating all their love and support for the famous Black Crystal Witch. Firm footsteps echo across the stone corridor, while the legendary second best student approaches the battlefield. Isla Tristar enters the arena under warm applause, maintaining her imposing posture and her focused and confident gaze. The beautiful purple-haired young woman watches the excited crowd, finding humor in all that fuss over a simple combat. She positions herself in the center of the battlefield, staring coldly at her opponent, who is already awaiting her for the dispute's start. The young opponent wields his large red, pommeled sword and greets the girl with a quite friendly tone. He introduces himself with a confident smile on his face, revealing his name is Kelters and that he is ready for combat. The student council president speaks firmly, guaranteeing justice and a fair evaluation for all students. From above, she watches the two combatants in the arena, declaring her wish that everyone has a much better school life. Isla reflects in silence, remembering everyone at the academy remembers very well what Wolfram's terrible management was like. She knows if Eve attacked her own brother in public, she would gain easy approval. But the president decides not to do that. The fiancé wonders if Eve does that for family honor or another reason, but respects the fact that she doesn't insult her brother. Diverting her thoughts from student politics, the young woman focuses her attention entirely on the upcoming clash. On the other side, Kelter sighs in a relaxed way, mentally commenting that all that ceremony is very tiring. The announcer declares the start of the combat, and Isla gets deeply annoyed for being introduced only as the eternal vice leader. The confident look and shining eyes of that ordinary freshman make her even more annoyed before the duel starts. She introduces herself formally, maintaining her cold and arrogant posture, while saying she expects a good clash against him. The red-haired youth draws his thin red, pommeled sword with agility, cheerfully introducing himself as the challenger. Isla starts recalling her fiancé's words and thinks with affection and seriousness about Wolfram von Lohengrin's name. She knows he is considered the weakest and talentless, but recognizes that the sparkle of his blue eyes is incomparable. The Black Crystal Witch deeply wishes to shine beside him on the grand stage the blonde is building at school. She recalls his questioning about having what it takes to win and feels her determination strengthen. With a confident and enigmatic smile on her face, the powerful purple-haired young woman prepares to start her attack. Various purple magic crystals start floating around her while she decides to prove her great worth in battle. The red-haired youth swallows hard, and his expression changes to great worry upon feeling her enormous magical pressure. Isla makes a silence gesture to interrupt the referee's explanations, showing she is ready to start. The Black Crystal Witch points at the opponent and surprises everyone by proposing a daring promise before fighting. She declares she will use her magic only a single time and guarantees that if the youth manages to block it, he will be the winner. After a brief moment of hesitation, the red challenger accepts the daring challenge with a serious look focused on victory. She flashes a quite confident and challenging smile, generously allowing the boy to make the duel's first strike. Without hesitating anymore, Kelters positions himself firmly with his sword raised, preparing to deliver his charge. With determination shining in his green eyes, he announces his attack and advances at high speed against the veteran. He executes an incredibly fast charge, cutting the wind toward the Black Crystal Witch, who remains motionless. Isla widens her eyes for a brief instant, totally impressed by his attack's surprising speed. Right after that, her gaze changes to an expression of satisfaction, mentally admitting that the freshman is very talented. She watches the youth's speedy approach, praising his fearless charge and his unusual agility for a rookie. The veteran evaluates that with that impressive skill, the red youth could easily rival second-year students. However, with extreme calm, she snaps her fingers, signaling that it is time to put her powerful magical defense into action. A gigantic barrier made of purple crystal emerges instantly from the ground, blocking the young warrior's path. Kelter's then sword collides hard against the crystal shield, but Isla knows his attack doesn't stop there. She watches the opponent with tranquility, wondering if he will try to jump over or bypass her large shield. To the veteran's surprise, the youth keeps forcing his sword directly against the resistant crystal barrier. Suddenly, the red pommel of his mysterious weapon starts to glow intensely, releasing a large amount of energy. Kelters lets out a fierce scream, concentrating all his physical strength and spiritual power in that piercing strike. He executes a devastating technique and manages to completely break the purple crystal shield with a powerful slash. The arrogant veterans in the stands get totally terrified and speechless upon seeing the freshman's destructive power. The student council president also demonstrates surprise upon seeing such immense strength coming from a simple novice student. Isla observes the pieces of crystal falling around her and finally understands the real reason for her fiancé's warning. With a proud smile on her face, she mentally praises Wolfram's wisdom and great perception of danger. Kelters wastes no time after breaking the defense and charges again, screaming with ferocity to try to finish the duel. The black crystal witch activates her special ability, preparing to launch a powerful magical counter-attack. The broken crystal fragments gather quickly in the air, creating dozens of sharpened stakes around the opponent. Upon seeing the start of the spectacular counter-attack, the veteran supporters cry with emotion, celebrating the witch's sovereignty. Kelters tries to dodge the purple stakes, raining in his direction with agility, but his disadvantage is evident. She praises the rookie's great determination, recognizing he truly had a powerful technique hidden up his sleeve. The veteran mentally confesses that she quite likes the focused look and willpower the red-haired youth demonstrates having. However, she signals that it is time to end the dispute, while an enormous amount of purple magic totally surrounds her. Isla launches her final magical attack, creating a gigantic and extremely powerful crystal that falls toward Kelters. She watches him from above, stating coldly that he will never manage to become strong enough to challenge her. The gigantic purple crystal hits the arena floor with brutal force, generating an immense explosion and lots of dust. Kelters is hit dead on by the devastating impact and lets out a terrible scream upon being completely dominated by the magic. An immense cloud of purple dust and smoke spreads across the entire battlefield after the powerful strike's finish. The combat judge runs hurriedly amid the smoke to check the situation and start announcing the grand winner. With the opponent fallen and defeated on the broken ground, the judge officially announces Isla Tristar's uncontested victory. She walks away with elegance and thinks that now she can finally go to Wolfram's booth, praying it is still open. The blondest street booth remains completely packed, with hungry customers shouting their orders nonstop at the counter. Wolfram praises Nefty's excellent work, while she tries to handle all the orders at high speed. The blonde says he needs to rest for his next battle, leaving his assistant indignant at such laziness. While serving customers, he starts reflecting worriedly on what would happen if his fiancée got hit in combat. He concludes she wouldn't be corrupted so easily, but decides he needs to offer a gift to calm her moods down. Suddenly, Isla herself appears silently right behind him, asking whose favor he is trying to win. The young man gets a gigantic scare from the sudden appearance and tries to disguise it by asking if her combat went well. She replies with a calm smile and says she would have liked to try one of the sweets, but laments they are almost sold out. To avoid trouble, the young man quickly extends a well-filled paper package and hands it as a gift to his fiancée. Upon opening the packaging, she discovers he saved a hearty portion of the donuts and buns especially for her. The blonde says her combat was probably very boring and suggests she use those sweets to cheer up a bit. Isla lets out a light laugh, showing she is quite satisfied with her fiancé's consideration and spontaneous kindness. With flushed cheeks, she praises him, saying he really knows everything and confirms the clash was indeed dull. Upon seeing that friendly and sweet reaction, Wolfram feels a pit in his stomach, wondering if she isn't corrupted. The fiancé hugs the package with joy and guarantees she will savor each of the sweets while he watches her tense and quiet. Upon saying goodbye, she warns with a bright look that she will pay a visit to his establishment later that same day. Wolfram agrees with a gentle smile on his face, but on the inside, he is in complete panic, wondering the reason for that. She walks away, strolling slowly through the busy streets, thinking about how much she likes her blonde fiancé's way of acting, with the package of sweets well stored against her chest. She follows her path with an extremely happy and calm countenance. Wolfram lets out a sigh of relief for having survived the tense encounter, but is soon interrupted by a voice calling out to him. Nefty resurfaces with a scary aura, begging for help with the service, and the boss asks her to take her hand off her weapon. With 30% of the net profit at stake, the Grand Freshman Welcome Festival finally reaches its end. The young assistant celebrates with an expression of pure madness and dollar signs shining in her eyes upon seeing the sale's success. The next day, the sun shines brightly over the beautiful and imposing main buildings of the prestigious Magic Academy. Wolfram walks quietly through the school corridors, while other students start pointing and whispering. Some students comment with disdain that they can't believe he had the audacity to show up to attend classes. They wonder distrustfully what goes through the problematic young man's mind. But he simply ignores all rumors. Inside a room, an enormous amount of money in bills and gold coins is organized on the wooden table. Wolfram extends a very heavy leather bag and hands it over to his assistant, fulfilling the commission promise he made. The girl gets completely in shock, and with shining eyes upon seeing the immense amount of money she just received. The blonde calmly explains that that is her share, corresponding to just over 800,000 rins for the excellent service. She gets startled upon hearing about a fee and dramatically discourses, saying that charging brokerage fees wouldn't be honorable. She tightly hugs her precious coin bag, declaring she will accept the full amount like a true warrior. Without wasting time, the young woman jumps out the office's open window, running away quickly before her boss changes his mind. Wolfram watches her leave totally without reaction, mentally explaining that he actually wanted to give her even more money. The young man closes his eyes with a satisfied smile on his face, remembering that the previous day was extremely fun and lucrative. However, he notices his stamina bar is almost empty and realizes he ended up pushing himself beyond his body's limit. While walking, he is surprised by Isla's presence as she waits for him in the corridor, asking how his classes went. With a very friendly and nice countenance, the long purple-haired young woman invites him to go have lunch together at the cafeteria. The young man watches her distrustfully, internally wondering why she always decides things in such an authoritarian way. He decides to keep his complaints to himself and accepts the invitation, while she makes strange comments about their meal. Upon arriving at the restaurant, the friendly attendant receives them with a nice smile and suggests the day's menu specialties. The academy restaurant is quite busy with various students talking and savoring their meals at the tables. Isla notices her fiancé's delay in choosing and asks if he still hasn't managed to decide on his lunch order. The blonde suddenly closes the menu hard, catching the waitress's attention in a quite decided and serious way. He surprises everyone by firmly asking that they bring him the spiciest dish available on the place's entire menu. Wolfram insists seriously on his choice, wanting by all means to experience the meal with the highest spice level. The fiancé watches him completely shocked and scared, not understanding the reason. He wants to eat something so strong suddenly. Having a Korean soul, the blonde-haired youth feels a desperate need to eat something extremely spicy. The waitress brings a vibrant red and bubbling soup that looks to be incredibly hot and full of condiments. The experienced head chef watches him with a mocking smile, warning that he might regret it if he underestimates the dish. Wolfram thanks for the meal with such a scary look that it makes even the experienced cook tremble with dread and back away. Isla watches him with a disgusted grimace and asks with disdain if he really has the courage to eat that mysterious soup. The blonde guarantees he does, although his own face is already starting to sweat cold just from looking at the soup's smoke. He dips the spoon into the red soup, mentally preparing himself to take the meal's first and decisive spoonful. As soon as he puts the food in his mouth, the young man widens his eyes, feeling a true explosion of flavor and burning heat. Worried upon seeing him sweat, the fiancé quickly offers a glass of water, but he refuses firmly, maintaining his strong posture. He clenches his fist hard while she asks desperately if she should call a doctor to help him with that burning sensation. With a dramatic expression and lightning in the background, the youth seriously states that the food isn't actually spicy at all. He complains with disdain, explaining that the red color comes just from tomatoes, and that the dish lacks a lot of seasoning to be good. Isla gets curious about the statement and asks if it's really not that hot, while the young man invites her to try some. With flushed cheeks, she accepts suggestion, deciding to taste the mysterious broth to understand its true flavor. The beautiful young woman brings the spoon to her mouth and takes a small and delicate spoonful of the red soup he praised. The next instant, her expression changes drastically upon feeling the overwhelming impact of that extremely strong seasoning. The girl starts coughing and screaming in despair, feeling her mouth burn as if it were truly catching fire. Totally out of breath and with a red face from burning, she desperately tries to recover from that thermal suffering. Suddenly, she grabs a cup with a straw and starts drinking desperately to try to relieve the terrible burning sensation. The blonde watches the scene, relieved for having brought a spare strawberry shake that saved his fiancée from an even greater suffering. Still wiping the tears caused by the strong seasoning, she complains indignantly, wondering how anyone manages to eat that. He keeps insisting the dish is weak while the fiancé watches him with an expression of total exhaustion and disbelief. Suddenly, the couple is interrupted by a gloomy figure that emerges out of nowhere at their table, leaving both quite scared. A mysterious white-haired girl appears, savoring the spicy soup, and coldly agrees with Wolfram's opinion. The blonde gets completely paralyzed with dread upon recognizing the identity of that silent young woman who just showed up there. It is Ludica Hassan Shadow, a third-year student known for her extremely cold and dangerous personality. Wolfram recalls that in the original game, she was responsible for one of the worst possible endings involving assassinations. The protagonist remembers that failing important missions or acting cowardly in the story attracted her relentless fury. Any evil or selfish attitude committed by the player made her emerge from the shadows to apply a punishment. Without the victim realizing it, she appeared by surprise to execute the culprit in a fast, cold, and totally silent way. The Reaper always found those who committed evil deeds at the academy, applying her death sentence without any mercy. With frightening agility, she delivered her fatal blow, ensuring the sinner had zero chance of defense. The end was always tragic and merciless, resulting in an immediate death screen for any player acting in bad faith. Faced with that dangerous assassin, Wolfram starts sweating cold, fearing being the next target of the girl's relentless fury. Zephyryn's Reaper directly asks the young man to prepare that same special spicy flavor just for her. Time passes, and night begins to fall over the large dorms and classrooms of the immense and quiet academy. In his office, the blonde reflects calmly and concludes the chances of being attacked by her at the moment are almost zero. He knows if she truly wanted his demise, he would have been eliminated the exact moment she showed up at the table. However, to guarantee his safety, he decides to hire Nefty for a temporary personal escort job at the store. The warrior accepts the bodyguard service cheerfully, emphasizing that with a good salary, she would never make complaints. Wolfram focuses his determined gaze, knowing he needs to always be very well prepared for any risky situation. Suddenly, the assistant changes her expression upon sensing a dangerous presence and warns her boss that the Reaper has arrived. Ludica emerges in a spectacular way, dropping directly from the office ceiling with a frightening speed. The impact of her arrival generates an enormous amount of dust and debris, leaving the mood in the place incredibly tense. The white-haired Reaper stares at the young man in a scary way while he retreats on the sofa, totally taken by fear. Wolfram starts sweating cold when the girl seriously demands the spicy food he had promised to prepare for her. She watches him from above with a penetrating and scary look, asking coldly if the special dish is ready yet.